So when you were in Nepal, what were your biggest takeaways after the earthquake, and then what did you find from, or what lessons did you take away from that as far as the prospects of traveling to a place that's recently experienced a catastrophic event?
Yeah, well, what I saw, and one of the reasons why I went there, is that I was in Iceland during the volcanic eruptions, where nobody got hurt, nobody got killed, and still it had devastating effect on the tourism industry to start with, because people were seeing news images of people with gas masks where you couldn't see the sun. You know, it was like the middle of the night, even though it was, you know, in a broad daylight, because of the ashes. And I was living just over 100 kilometers away from the volcano, and everything was fine at my house. You know, I was sitting in my garden, and you know, the airport was open, and you know, there were no problems at all. So people had this notion that everything was in ruins in Iceland because of what they were seeing. So it's in a way, you know, another side of the CNN effect. You know, people see only images of the worst that's happening. And that's what we were seeing from Nepal. We were seeing images of destruction and destruction and destruction. Just collapsed houses and collapsed streets. And we were seeing images from Kathmandu. And I mean, our son was in Nepal during the earthquake. And you know, which was quite an experience. We didn't know where he was, and we didn't know if he was okay, and we had to try to figure out where he was. And we were very lucky. 6 hours later, we could locate him and confirm that he was alive. 2 days later, he went into Kathmandu. And even him, who was in Nepal, he had been watching, trying to get some news and realizing what was happening. And he didn't have quite as good access to news as we did here in Copenhagen. But still, you know, he had seen images of Kathmandu. And then he arrives in Kathmandu. And he was very surprised, because the houses were still there, and he was driving streets, and you know, things were functioning, and you know, because you had the image of everything being in ruins,
completely leveled, looking like a war zone, or like.
But it wasn't. There were a couple of streets that were like that. You know, there were old buildings that had collapsed, and if you went to Bhaktapur, I'm probably pronouncing that incorrectly, but it's a very old city just outside of Kathmandu. Up on a hill. There the devastation was much more clear, because all of the houses in that old part of the city are very old and badly built, and all of them had considerable damage. So there you really, okay, this is where I saw the images from.
The mudslides and things along those lines in those areas.
Yeah. So you do not get a correct image of what's happening. We can take Ukraine as an example as well. You know, people are afraid of, or were maybe afraid of going to Ukraine because of the war around Donetsk, and you know, they were going to Lviv, and Lviv is closer to Amsterdam than it is to the war zone, because Ukraine is a really big country.
That's fascinating. Yeah, when you put it in context and you actually look at the geography of it.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I think especially, and then with Nepal, I'd be interested in your thoughts on the ethics of tourism in those situations. Yep. Because you have the argument of, all right, are you adding additional strain on an economy or an environment that can't handle it at that moment? Or are they at a position where they're in desperate need of tourism, and every tourism dollar is a huge boon and a huge asset? Yeah.
Well, they're clearly in the need for tourists. I mean, they have manpower enough. So they don't need manpower. They lack resources, but I mean, they produce their own food, so that's not a problem. You can get to eat there. There was electricity like it was before, which means that 40% don't have access to electricity, and in the capital, you know, there are outages. But that's normal for that city, and it's still the same way. There was nothing at all wrong with traveling in Nepal, absolutely nothing. They were just desperately in need for tourists. And also because the earthquake happens in a specific location. And there may be villages around the epicenter where you cannot travel because it's so devastated and they are really, really struggling, and you would be taking away from the resources. But the rest of the country, things are just as they were before, and they need the tourists. I mean, Nepal is one of the poorest countries in the world, and tourism is a livelihood for a big part of the population. It is incredibly important in the economy. And it's really sad to see how Western media and often foreign services ruin this, because foreign services give us warnings. Oh, there's an earthquake. We see pictures and hear stories of devastation. So we tell all our citizens to stay out of Nepal.
Well, there was just the recent, at the end of 2015, a warning from the U.S. where they gave a global warning, right?
Yeah, like, it was absolutely...
Don't leave America, but more likely to get harmed or robbed or shot back in Arizona than
Precisely. Precisely.
Yeah.
So it's idiotic. And the worst part is, I mean, usually they should give out those warnings to specific areas, not to the entire country. And besides, many of those foreign services haven't even yet updated their warnings. So they have a warning that's based on something that happened 9 months ago. And it's absolutely not relevant. And because of this warning, I mean, I don't care about those warnings.
Yeah, I tend to ignore them as well.
I ignore them. But if I need to buy a travel insurance, I may not be able to because of the warning.
Coverage and things along those lines.
Yeah.
Absolutely, yeah.
And if you're a travel company and you were planning a group trip, you cannot get coverage and you need to cancel the group trip.
Right.
So that is a big issue. And the biggest problem in Nepal at the moment is India. Because in September, Nepal got a new constitution. And there is a minority in southern Nepal, up to the Indian border, who is very upset about how the country was divided in Nepal. Because they wanted to have an area which they control themselves, but they were mixed with some other tribes. I don't know the exact details of it. And India is supporting their claim. So India has closed the borders. So Nepal isn't getting any fuel.
So really, especially going in the winter and that side of it.
Yes, we're going through winter. It's a very poor nation that is trying to recover after an earthquake. And India is putting an enormous pressure on them. And it's getting absolutely no attention in the international media because it's not an armed conflict.
Right.
But they can't operate their stoves. They can't operate their vehicles, buses. They're getting some fuel from China. So the fuel prices are very high and it's very difficult to get any fuel.
I remember
so private cars are not allowed to get fuel in some places. Things are very tricky.
Yeah, so that's probably the death toll attached to that, I imagine. It's actually quite high.
Yeah, I don't know any numbers regarding that, but the implications are enormous because it stalls all relief work. Yeah. It stalls the recovery, and it has an even more devastating effect on the tourism. But, I mean, the operators, they are only offering what they can offer. So if you can buy a trip to Nepal, I absolutely recommend it. And if anything, now is a better time than ever. There are fewer tourists, so you get more, what can we say?
Rich experience, right?
A richer experience. And there is a very strong spirit in the country at the moment, which is a privilege to get to experience. And I think it's an humbling experience to be there. And especially for us from the West, where we have everything and we're always complaining and we have this excessive society with overconsumption and everything. And we go to a place like Nepal where they are so poor, they don't have access often to clean water and electricity. They just went through an earthquake where 9,000 people got killed. And they still smile, and they're still so thankful, and they're so humble, and they're so full of spirit to just rebuild and continue. And I don't know, it's just an amazing experience, and I recommend it for everyone. If you haven't made your plans for 2016, go to Nepal. It's just
that level of authenticity and just kind of the life lessons that you can learn from people in situations like that
it's you really learn something from it. It's not just a fun experience or beautiful landscape. We always see pictures of the mountains, and of course the mountains are stunning. But it's a culture we can really learn from, and the hospitality and the friendliness and
yeah, because I guess that's the other fear that kind of floats in there a little bit, is that it's going to be a very uncomfortable experience, or that you're going to be exposed to being hit up for money or that approach, versus the reality of the situation, and being in a situation then where there's so much warmth and so much inclusiveness and such an incredible hospitality culture. That you learn so much about yourself and the people all at once, that that's really the gift, and you walk away with far more than I guess you contributed.
Yes, precisely. And that's something you can't really put in a brochure, but that's the big takeaway.